Hey guys, it's Gracie. So I'm going to be going through this tutorial on how I turned a regular dining set into an outdoor dining set. This is the second application of paint stripper I'm using to remove the varnish. I used a strong one for the first pass. It took off a lot, and then I used citrus strip. That's what I'm removing right now. Most of the time uh, it takes 2 coats to get it off, and then still you'll have to sand it afterwards. The first one I used is called Jasco. It's a really strong, really expensive paint stripper. And this one is one with less chemicals and takes longer to work. But it's really good, I find, for after you already get the hard stuff off the top. I'm using a metal scraper. I find it works a lot better than a plastic scraper. And because I'm sanding it, I'm not super, it's solid wood also. I'm not really concerned about gouging or scraping the top surface. The trick with the strong stuff, the Jasco, you have to put it on so liberally, like no spots can get dry. It works in 15 minutes. Usually as soon as you're done applying it, you can start taking it off, and if it starts to dry up, then it won't work. You'll have to just continue putting more on top so it stays wet until you're ready to scrape it off. And the citrus strip here, you can leave it on for several hours, but if you're working outside, you're going to have to again, make sure that it's on so thick that it doesn't dry. I just use an old chip brush to put it on. This is one of my favorite parts of the whole process. I just find it so satisfying. Next step, you're going to go in with mineral spirits and steel wool. I find the coarse steel wool the best. And I'm just being gentle as I spread the product around, and then I'm going to scrape off all the residue of the stripper, going with the grain of the wood. This is going to make the sanding process a lot easier, and it's not going to gunk up your sandpaper so quickly. So always try and get as much off here as I can so that I don't waste sandpaper. As the steel wool gets gunked up, you can turn it inside out or get new stuff if needed. And then I go in with a clean rag and more mineral spirits, and I wipe it all down. After this, you're going to have to let it dry fully, probably a couple hours at least, 2 to 4 hours, I'd say, unless it's outside, maybe less time before sanding it, or else the sandpaper will just kind of shred the wood. And I'm not really using the orbital sander properly here. I find that it just works a lot better if I just use like one corner of it. So yeah, it's not the proper way to use it. So I'm starting with an 80 grit here, and then I'm going to do a quick pass over with a 120 grit and then a 220 grit. You want to make sure you go over it enough with those higher grits to take out all the swirl marks that the lower grit paper will make. It won't show now, but whenever you apply the stain and the varnish after, it'll show all these little swirly marks if you don't pass over it with the higher grit stuff. This set was super easy to do because it's still it's solid wood. I did a lot of sets out of the same kind of wood. It's like this really cheap Malaysian wood, but it's easy to work with, and as long as it's not veneer, I'm happy. So after that, you're just going to dust off all the sawdust. So I start with a rag, and then I go over it with a tack cloth. Tack cloth is just a kind of a sticky piece of cheesecloth. There's wax on it. It really removes a lot of the dust. And then I do an extra step of cleaning it off with paint thinner. I'm using lacquer thinner here. It's really similar. I'm probably about 36, maybe 37 weeks pregnant here at the time that I was recording the video. I've since had the baby, and I needed to finish doing this video so that I can work on the next video, which will be the birth video. So I had to finish this one first. The process is really similar to what I did in the other video where I was doing the farmhouse style dining set, except this set is for outside only, so I use some different varnishes to protect against the elements. So I'm just going in here with the paint thinner, making sure all the dust and sawdust is completely removed. Now, here's my first time working with a pre-stained wood conditioner, and I found that it made a huge difference. So, in the way that the stain looks after you apply it, it was a lot less blotchy than other projects I've done where I just went in on top of the bare wood with the straight stains. So you just soak the wood in this conditioner, applying it super liberally. I wasn't here, but in later projects I did after this, I just kind of poured it on, smothered it around, and then this wood that I'm using is super dry, so by the time you go around 5 minutes later to wipe off the excess, there's nothing left really. You can leave it on for 5 to 15 minutes before wiping it off and then applying the stain. It says you should apply the stain within 2 hours of applying it though. And here I decided to go with a fun beachy color. I used a urethane oil-based stain in the color Coral. I ended up doing 3 coats of it to try and get it really dark and bright. And this stain here, it says to wipe it off as soon as you put it on. So I did half the table, then I wiped it off, then I did the other half. Or else I think it would have been too tacky, too sticky if I would have done the whole table before wiping it off, because it was such a big surface. And then for the benches, I just did 1 application per bench before wiping it off. I bought this set on OfferUp for $60. I was originally going to use the benches. I was only interested in the benches. I was just going to use the benches for a dining room set. I was going to stain them a matching color of a table I did. But after getting this set with the table, I decided to turn it into like an outdoor picnic table for our house. And I'm using lint-free rags, just white t-shirts cut up to, they don't even have to be white t-shirts, just cut up t-shirts to apply and wipe off the stain. And something I learned along the process is you always have to wipe off stain. I thought that maybe if I wanted it darker, I could just let it cure like that without wiping it off, but I learned the hard way that all stain needs to be wiped off, and if you want it darker, you just have to wait till it's completely dry and go in with additional coats. So for the second coat, there's no sanding in between. You just wipe it off with a cloth and then pass over with a tack cloth and apply your second coat of stain. Same thing here, I did the table half and half. So you can still see a little bit of blotchiness after the second coat, so I ended up doing a third coat. I didn't record that. Now I'm getting ready to apply the top coat here. I ended up going with, because it was going outside, I went with a boat varnish called Total Boat. It's a clear, water-based, kind of like a polyurethane, but it's a lot tougher. It's for boats. The nice thing, it's pretty expensive. It's about 30 bucks for a half gallon, I want to say. Anyways, it's kind of like polyurethane, like in the way you would apply it, like a water-based polyurethane. So it goes on milky looking. You can't see that here in the video, but in my can that I'm holding, it's like a white color. You don't have to sand between coats though, like you do polyurethane. So that's really nice, especially for big projects. Although I did use a very high grit, a Scotch Brite pad to just knock off some of the little dust nubs that were stuck to it. So I did lightly sand it in between, but it's not necessary. Usually you would have to sand polyurethane in between each coat with 220 grit sandpaper. So this probably, the Scotch Brite pad is maybe equivalent to like a 400 grit or maybe 500 or 600 grit sandpaper, just to get it feeling a little bit smoother. And I wanted to keep the gloss, so I didn't do that on the last coat. I did three coats of this varnish. Now I'm just going in painting the skirt and then cleaning up the legs with my little buddy Griffin. And I left a bunch of this footage in here because he's so small and so cute. So I'm using TSP and then just clean rag with water to wipe off the TSP. It's trisodium phosphate, I think it stands for. It's really good for cleaning furniture before paint. And Griffin's helping me. He should be wearing gloves. Now I'm going in here with a little blend I made myself. It's mostly chalk paint, but there is some regular paint, like wall paint. I forget what base it is. But it was mostly chalk paint, so it went on top of that shiny varnish pretty easily. I did 2 or 3 coats, I can't remember now. It's like a beige color. And then I went in here with Spar Urethane. It's like a polyurethane for outdoors. It's a lot more tougher against the elements. And I bought that in spray cans. You can buy it in a regular can, but I thought it would go a lot faster in spray cans. So that was the end of the project. That's what it looks like. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.